This going. Hello, everybody, and welcome to our third week in our special series that we're now hosting every week through Inclusive Theater, where we kind of flip the script, if you will, and iTowney actors and family members interview people that are in the arts community, because we are a performing arts company, and that's super cool. Just so we keep talking to one another, engaging with one another, talking about inclusion in the arts, especially now when we need it the most, because we can't physically be together. And this week, Justin Karcher is going to be joining us, and he should be on shortly. But I wanted to just really quickly read something to you, and I hadn't realized until Chris had mentioned just before we went live about it being obviously National Poetry Month. But, excuse me, due to COVID-19, more and more people are turning to poetry, according to poets.org. Because amid fear and uncertainty, and I quote from their page, poetry and inspiring language can help bring solace and needed strength. The week of March 23rd through 29th, traffic to the poets.org website increased over 32%, with more than 1.4 million visits. Last week, more than 4,000 people signed up to receive a poem a day in their inboxes, which is double the average of subscribers. So obviously, now more than ever, you know, we rely heavy on the arts to get us through. Some folks are super duper creative during this time, which is awesome. I am not one of those people. So if you are, kudos to you. I wish I could. I've been having this kind of shutdown for creativity. It's very challenging for me to put pen to paper, and I'm trying to remedy that, but there's only so much we can do. So for those who don't know who I am, my name is Amy Levesque, and I'm the Executive Director of Inclusive Theater of Western New York. We have a few of our iTowney actors here, Kat, Chris, Quentin, and Queen. And we also have Janelle there too. I didn't see you back there. Hi. So until Justin gets here, let's talk a little bit about poetry. I know Chris writes poetry. Q, do you write poetry?
No, but I read a little bit of poetry.
You read it? Okay. And Matt, we have, who we know is a playwright. But Matt, do you write poetry at all? He's muted. I don't know if he'll be able to. Okay.
He's muted.
He's muted. Carly, do you write poetry? Because you're a new face for us, which is awesome. We're glad to have you here.
Yeah, sometimes I do.
Oh, there's Dale. Matt, do you write poetry?
I mostly don't, but I was honored that Justin Karcher told me that one of my plays sounded like poetry. So I don't know. Don't know if it counts.
Hopefully we'll have that conversation with him about that and ask him why. That wasn't the one, we didn't know about this. This is a good question. Carly, what kind of poetry do you write? Or do you have a specific genre or?
It kind of just depends on what I'm feeling. Usually it's free verse, but sometimes it's other stuff.
Have you been writing for a long time?
Not really. I started, like, I kind of learned how to do it when I was in high school, but not too much, and I've been picking it back up again in my creative writing class.
And are you finding that you're creative during this time, or are you stuck too?
I'm trying to keep creative as much as I can, but I'm also a college student taking classes, so.
That in itself is a challenge for sure, for sure. And one of the things that we're going to do, so keep an eye out. We haven't planned dates, but we're going to have some pop-up writing sessions that hopefully for people that are stuck or maybe, you know, need some kind of inspiration, that we'll be able to do that during a session that we have. Hey, Dallas, how's it going? So we're just waiting on Justin, who is getting everything installed and ready to go. But we're just talking about poetry. This is National Poetry Month. And whether or not you've been able to write, because I know you write some really good poetry, because I've read a couple of your things. Have you found that during this time of the Rona that you've been able to write? Are you inspired?
Not really. I think so I usually write about the time and I write about what I'm feeling, but it's hard to write about what's going on right now. Part of me feels like it's not really necessary to write about what's going on right now. Um, just the fact like everyone's going through it, so like it's all pretty much going to be just jumbled up together. But what I have been doing is instead of writing, I've just been like doing these journal sketches, like cartoon type stuff to just journal out what happened throughout the day. Like if I have a conversation with someone, if something they said sort of hit me a certain way, I'll write it down or I'll sketch it out. If I hear something on the radio, if I hear a fun fact about animals or something like that, I'll just cartoon it, sketch it out. So it's not so much writing, but I'm sort of getting it's a different creative process that I'm sort of exploring through this
That's super
quarantine
cool. And
time.
that kind of like tips back to what Matt said last week about the types of writing, right? And then I don't know if it was before or after Matt mentioned the ways of writing and how we do all these different kinds of writing here and there, right? And even a Facebook post is writing. It's just a
Yeah.
different format. A blog post is writing. Putting a dumb picture up on something is also writing. So we have a lot of things that we don't typically consider to be writing, and they truly are. So if you're at least getting something out, that's awesome. Another really interesting thing that I was reading this week, and I don't know if I'll be able to find it quick enough, but it was from somebody who works in trauma. And she had shared her comments about now, right? And one of the things that she noted was that our brain, because it's such a funky, cool thing, right? It gives us only what it thinks we are able to handle. And it compartmentalizes, it keeps us safe. So for people who may be having an issue with creativity, it could just be, in fact, that is part of your brain that right now isn't accessible. And it's because of whatever the brain is doing to help us, right? And I believe that because, there's also this idea, oh, you're working home, everything is great. Working at home is terrific. Working at home during a pandemic is very different. And I think we need to keep having those conversations. And, if you're not writing, it's okay. We're all going through some serious shit right now. This is not easy times. We're literally surrounded by illness and death. Some of us haven't left our house in days. It's natural that those things would be affected. And the only suggestion would be on my end anyway, and I am by no means a professional in this, but just to keep doing what it is that you're doing to relay your voice. And I like the idea. I mean, journaling's great, whether it's a picture or words, it doesn't matter, right? Because you're speaking. It's a type of conversation, just as behaviors are. We have to look at the way different things interact with one another. And those are okay. And maybe on the other side of this, you'll be able to say, oh, okay, I get it now. But, not everybody's going to go out there and write the best-selling novel about coronavirus.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen, right? But
It's so interesting. If I can jump in. Oh, here's Justin.
hey, Justin.
But to what you were saying, there's so much right now, and it can be so overwhelming. So not to beat yourself up if you're stuck, but that your voice is your voice. That's like such an important thing, is that, we might all be sharing, there might be similarities in our stories depending on our background or who we are or where we've been or things. There's always going to be some crossover, but your experience is unique and your voice is unique. And so it's important, however you can put that out there and share that's your story to tell. And I think that's a really important thing to mention. And I just want to mention one other thing to the pandemic, if it's okay. I know I'm intruding on Justin's time here, so I'll be quick.
Hey, you're good.
But
Everyone.
I was in a Zoom meeting with some other disability church advocates recently, and we were talking about, disabled. One thing that disabled people a lot of times have been saying, like me, like especially physically disabled, mobility impaired, like I'm sort of used. Like I was stuck in the house for a couple of years. So that isolation, that feeling, that is sort of a world we know. But one thing that is new for all of us is like when we could get out, the rest of the world was sort of normal. We knew what to expect. We knew we could, like if you needed to go to the hospital, you knew that was going to be there. You knew other people weren't in crisis around you. And now, to Dallas's point, we're like all in crisis together. And so we took everything that we knew, even if it was a different experience for each of us, and kind of threw that all up in the air. And that's what makes it, I think, even more challenging. But again, I think why that's important to share our stories now.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thanks.
Well, what I will do now then, we are very, very happy to have Justin Karcher here with us. He is, in my world, poet extraordinaire. We're so grateful that, we were able to stage one of his poems this past fall. I don't even know, like all the days and things are blended together. And it was such an honor for us to do it. And we're so grateful that you're here. We're trying to keep this conversation happening, beyond our theater walls. Obviously, a lot of people are trying to be inventive and all those things, but also because we know now more than ever, inclusion in the arts is so important.
Absolutely.
So I'm going to turn it over to Dallas, Quentin, Chris, Queen, and Kat to get the ball rolling, and I'll be watching for chat, and we'll be right here.
Well, hello. Happy to be here. I hope everyone is healthy and well, and families are good, and I mean as good as anyone can be relatively during all this. So glad to see all of you.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure.
So as Amy was saying, we're sort of doing this to get a feel for and try to incorporate inclusion in the arts and sort of get that ball rolling and keep everyone in good spirits, but also stay together in a way.
Yeah.
So before you came on, we were talking about how our writing processes have changed throughout this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that we sort of had for you, we know that on your Facebook, you are out and about on the town and sort of telling stories about what you see and things that you hear. So how has that sort of changed for you during this pandemic?
Yeah, that was one of the nice questions when I was reading through that. I was like, oh yeah. Yeah, so well, obviously I can't be taking these like long 2-hour midnight walks anymore, which is kind of it's really annoying because that was always a very cathartic experience for me. Kind of feeling one with the city, but also to kind of corroborate my thoughts throughout the day. And so I don't necessarily have that anymore. I've been walking on lunch. I was able to work from home, which is nice. So there's that, but the lunch walks are a whole different beast entirely. Not to say that interesting things don't happen on that. And I'm sorry, but my cat is attacking the cupboard for food. So I apologize if you hear that in the distance. What was I saying? Catharsis. Yeah, it's not cathartic, the sound of a cat banging a cupboard, but it is life. But nevertheless, but in terms of the writing process, thankfully, I've had like stockpiles of like writing that hasn't gone anywhere over the years. So I've been kind of actually having the time to like edit through all of that stuff. So in terms of the writing process, it has kind of moved more towards editing rather than writing per se. I've also been like writing poems about the like plethora of movies I've been watching. So like I've been rewatching like the Marvel movies in in chronological order of when they happen. It's a very nerdy comic. I could talk probably for an hour about all that, but I've been like writing a poem for each movie. So it wasn't necessarily for nighttime walks. It was a lot of times it was letting inspiration kind of hit me in the face, whether kind of a conversation with, you know, another soul who just happens to be walking. Now it's almost, you almost have to kind of MacGyver your way through inspiration. You're given like a piece of construction paper, a bad movie, and like whatever's in your pantry, write like a poem about it. So like it's almost like you're forced to experience these kind of writing prompts in real time. So in terms of the writing process, it has changed ever so slightly, but I'm like still writing. It's just not as rigorous of a beast as walking outside and having the world smack you in the face. The world is still smacking you in the face, but in different ways now.
So based on that sort of question that just popped in my mind, so when you're sort of, like you said, MacGyvering your way through these creative think processes, do you ever find yourself coming to a blank, and then do you ever find yourself sort of forcing yourself to create something, or what sort of happens there for you?
It's interesting, especially like, so usually I put a lot of pressure on myself to like at least write something a night. And it's always kind of been this kind of maddening, anxiety-inducing kind of pressure. So consequently, due to, you know, everything being shut down, I've kind of been teaching myself just to kind of relax and think. So so if I draw a blank, I'm all right with that blank for the first time in forever. So I feel like I'm being really like oddly existential, but like I'm like having the time to like mull over the blanks in my life, or mull over the writer's block, which when things are kind of just happening, you know, as normal, I would always feel like annoyed with writer's block and I would have to destroy it. Or if I had a creative block, I'd be like, Justin, why do you have like a goddamn creative block? There's like the whole world is out there. But now technically the whole world really isn't out there right now. So like I'm able to kind of mull and think about writer's blocks, which is a whole different kind of experience. So I've been like, you know, experimenting and getting to know the blank, so to speak, if that makes sense. I'm being like, I don't mean to like rant poetically about things, but it's probably going to happen.
Oh no, this is perfect. This is what we want.
Oh, hey, I have a question. I've heard recently that you had a play produced in New York, if I'm not mistaken. Tell us a little bit more about that and how that went about.
Oh yeah, so well, that's been canceled, so that's not happening.
Well, obviously,
Which is fine. I mean, just anytime you get like an acceptance email is kind of thrill enough. Like, so, you know, obviously, it's oh man, what was that piece? Okay, it was a piece about a Blizzard babies. I had it in the quickies, the alleyway quickies a couple of years ago. I've been refining it since. I just submit everywhere. So also it's a nice time to submit places. If, you know, any writers, you know, if you're sitting at home with nothing to do, just submit your stuff everywhere. Yeah, so every so often I just get a spur of inspiration. I decide to send to every theater company that has like open calls. Honestly, most of the time they won't even respond, so you can assume that you have not been accepted. But you know, this theater company reached out. They're going to put it on. Its rehearsals seem to have been going well, so that's nice. But yeah, I mean, I'll take the thrill of an acceptance and just move on from there. But thanks for asking. I forgot about that, to be honest.
Oh, can you elaborate a little bit more on the play, like what's it about?
So it's a retelling of the Medusa and Perseus myth, but it takes place during a blizzard in Buffalo, and a couple get back together, kind of, and it's a recreation of that myth, but set in the nothingness of a Rust Belt apartment during a blizzard. And it deals with things like alcoholism and addiction. Alcohol is something I've struggled with for a long time. And also a lot of other people. I've been in other Zoom sessions, and everyone's just kind of drinking, and I'm like, well, there's one way to evolve, I guess, is drinking well with social media. Regardless, I'll formulate that thought a bit better. But yeah, the play deals with alcoholism, addiction, and it's what does a hero mean, especially nowadays. So yeah, that's kind of what that piece is about. It's a recreation of a myth, essentially.
I had a special.
Oh, sorry to cut. That was a very unhelpful description. I'm not as tactful, or I'm not as if I had to like pitch something in a meeting, it's always just me rambling. So like, I feel like sometimes I'll hit something 15% of the time, but like, I hope that answered something, but like, I'll rant a lot. I have no problem writing the stuff, but like describing it can take a bit.
I said, I don't know. I thought, you could still tell that story after. I mean, it could change to Shelter in Place instead of during the blizzard, but it's still sort of the same story of people being kind of stuck together and not being able to get out, and where that goes from there. I mean, so there's some themes there that I think might be even more pertinent now than you intended at the time that you wrote it.
Yeah, no, it's kind of weird. Like, so it's been like this. I've been experiencing kind of like this kind of Nostradamus. I guess it's gonna sound bold as I start off with that. But these weird. So I've been doing this thing in which I give actors poems to read on Facebook, and then they record a video. So I've been having time to like re-listen to things that I wrote like months ago. And it's been weird. Like, I was talking to one actor today about it, Ricky Needham. And like he read a poem I wrote inspired by West Side Story, which was over at Musical Fair. And there's like a whole segment of the poem which like I start talking about like unemployed workers catching like this impossible cold, and like it's a whole like stanza about it. And I'm like, so when I listened to the video of him reading that, I was like, whoa, that's like kind of what's happening now. And then I started looking at like other stuff that I wrote, like a few months ago, and there's like weird mentions of like cold, and like I used pandemic a couple of times. I mean, mind you, like poets and writers, we kind of get obsessed with like terms, so we'll go like 3 months in which they just keep popping up in places. So I don't know if I was in that frame, but it's really strange listening to like words that you wrote, but like, kind of recontextualized into what's happening. And it was this kind of weird like X-Files music, like the theme played as I like listened to these things. I was like, oh my God. So I've been kind of obsessed over that, how we almost kind of, I don't want to go off on a tangent here, but it's almost like we as creatives, we almost naturally sync up with what's going on in the world, whether we know it or not. And it's kind of this impulsive reaction. So if you're writing, if you're creating, it's almost naturally sync up with the world, whether you want it to or not. So that's kind of been thinking about that aspect of the creative process has been interesting.
It's interesting to me. Dallas, is it okay if I ask a follow-up question? I know I don't want to throw us off track too much, but it's interesting discussion to me, because you mentioned having other people read some of your work and whatever, and I'm reminded about, that you had your poem that you turned into a play, and then we performed in the last series. And I wonder what that process was like for you. And is it different, like, when you write something, or at least this is what it feels like to me, when you write something, you kind of have your vision or your sound in your head of what it's like. And then when somebody else takes it and does it, it might be completely different than what you thought. And what was that like for you? And did that happen? And what was that like for you?
That's an interesting question. So it's kind of weird. So I kind of operate under the kind of kill your darlings kind of mentality. So, oh my God, my cat just jumped on the stove, so I'm sorry.
We have a cat too.
I love cats.
Besides our cat in our group here.
Oh,
That's why we like you.
yeah. Well, thank you. So I operate kind of under a kill your darlings kind of mentality. So once like I'm done with a piece, I have like no like concept of where I want it to go. Like especially with what ultimately became a theater piece. Like I had no concept of where I want it to go. Like once it's out of my hands, I just want other people to like do what they want or do what they feel compelled to do with it. So I know like some writers are very, and there's no wrong or right way about it. I know playwrights who, you know, they want to sit in on every rehearsal and they'll have like a comment for like everything. I'm not that person. If you want to delete something, go ahead and delete it. I'm very hands off with that. But in terms of the opioid Zodiac, that was like absolutely fascinating because I had the idea that it probably could be a play. I kind of operate in that weird gray area of playwright poet. So like monologues can sound like poems, poems can be monologues. So I almost kind of like dress in a different costume whenever it suits me or suits the situation, so to speak. So with like opioid, like it was amazing that like it was like accepted. It was like clearly it was honored to be a part of it because it was what I felt like the only theater company who would put that piece on in the area, which was awesome to see. And like y'all took it in a completely different light. Like the idea of having it like staged as like a poetry reading was like fascinating. And like that was a situation which I saw how it was staged and I was like, oh, there we go. This is how it has to be staged from now on. So like I redid like all the stage directions and I had like the setting changed and like that was awesome. Like I feel like y'all did most of the work for me because I just had like the stage direction of like people gather together. And then I was like, well, somebody will do something with this. And then like, lo and behold, you guys came up with this awesome idea. And then I just re-edited everything to fit that setting. So like when those things happen, it's like incredible. And that's kind of what I like to happen. I kind of have an understanding of how like directors work. Like I stay away from writing stage directions because I know a lot of times directors are just going to scratch them up anyways, unless they're absolutely important. Like I know some writers who are like, you know, man stands up and walks to the left to grab a cup of coffee. And I'm like, he may not walk left. He may grab that cup of coffee, but he may be holding it. Or like, I my mind doesn't work that way. Like it's kind of almost like, I don't like putting together puzzles, for instance. My mind just is not like, my mind's just not there. I can't.
You leave space.
Yeah, I can't focus with like where things go. So analytically, my brain doesn't work like that. And that's kind of how like, I view like setting up a scene. Like I have an idea of two people in a room. I don't know, maybe one sitting on a couch. I don't know, but like have fun with it. And like I'm ranting, but y'all did a fantastic job at opioid, and it changed my way. It permanently changed how I view that piece. And
Dude, I was scared to death.
Oh,
I'm like, I know him. This has got to be great. I was terrified. So thank you.
It was absolutely great. It was a lot of times my words are. Oh, this is gonna sound really pompous, and I don't want it to. But like a lot of times, people have difficulty translating my work. A lot of some theater companies in the past have had a hard time kind of translating kind of poetry to the stage in a kind of way that makes sense. So a lot of times, my verbiage doesn't get captured in the way that I think it's meant to be. But you guys completely got it 100%, and that's a rarity. And so kudos again for that. So I don't know if I answered a question there, but like I'm talking about verbiage and being bad at puzzles and my cat jumping on a stove. But I'm pretty sure I hit something.
Yeah. No, thanks. I appreciate it. It's like, to me, it almost seems like it takes on its own life. It goes from being your thing to being its own thing.
Oh, exactly. You know what I mean? That's like as a creative person or just as a creative in general, like that's like the best honor I could think of is putting something out there in the world and having it like, you know, evolve into its own life and its own mannerisms. And it's a beautiful thing to, you know, to hand off your creation, I guess. So I sound like Dr. Frankenstein.
No, it makes sense. I keep thinking about Johnny Cash's work in American Four and that album where he did Nine Inch Nails, where he did the Trent Reznor song Hurt, or he did Personal Jesus, and things like that. And the songs changed completely from what they were, with the original writers into this entirely different thing. So I don't know. I think it's interesting. Thanks for answering.
Oh man, my pleasure.
Pat, did you have a question? Oh no. So going back to sort of translating off of that conversation, what are some of the other challenges you face with a show or production in general in the theater?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I feel like to really delve into that, it'd be like the time frame of like a Lord of the Rings trilogy, man. We can go back and forth. I can also rant about what I think are problems with the theater community that, that affects the way shows are run. I guess people really don't. There are issues in which people fully don't embrace the collaborative process as much as I want them to. And also, I mean, the boring answer is like, fine, there's financial reasons, all sorts of things. I want theater to be weirder and more reflective of how life is for everybody, not just a very like theater in Buffalo for the most part is too vanilla and too suburban, and it doesn't take as much chances as I want it to. Obviously, people are under financial restrictions, but I don't like when creativity is stifled for whatever reason. And I know I'm going to sound like a 16-year-old kid who wants to start a punk band, and I still want to start a punk band all the time. So I always think that everything is possible and everything deserves to be dismantled. So it's always weird when I want to dismantle everything, but I also want to hold everything up. So it's a very kind of conflicting feelings. I mean, I feel like a lot of times theater doesn't necessarily take into account like things that happen in life. Like one time I was doing a production and one of my actors ended up going to jail, so we had to like work around that. So it's just productions that don't consider the all-encompassing nature of people's lives, and I want it to be a more organic experience from top to bottom. Man, I am going on. If you have any more specific question regarding that, because I can formulate a thought, but it might take about 10 minutes for me to hit the nail on it.
And I think that's perfect to where we actually want to go with this conversation, and that's sort of why we wanted to have these conversations, to get to having, I think what you were alluding to, that more of inclusion and having everyone a part of it, not just certain people.
And thank God for you guys and everything that you're doing. I've been raving about inclusive to like everyone. I love what you guys are doing, and you have my full support for anything going on, and I want to be a part of every production you guys put up.
Thank you.
Just throwing it out there.
We sincerely appreciate it.
My question kind of goes along with all of that, with us being an inclusive and having people with disabilities and people without disabilities and people playing non-traditional roles and things like that. Does that affect you as a writer and how you write pieces, and knowing that maybe inclusive might be performing it? And if you had a person in mind, like you said, you're mostly hands off, but maybe you had a person in mind, but now we're suddenly casting somebody who's in a wheelchair, or a female playing a male role or something like that. Does that affect or change how you write?
So that's a great question. And so as a writer, I don't specify at all the characters or who the characters are. To be perfectly honest, like I will always have, and a lot of times like I will have to name characters just because somebody's like, "Can you please name these characters?" And I'm like, I don't know why that's important, like because I don't mention them by name in the play. But like, so like I am always like very blank slate, like man, woman, or woman, or like, and anything in between or anything like that. Yeah, so I know some people are like, this character has to be a 65-year-old stockbroker from Yonkers. And I'm like, whoa. My mind just doesn't work like that. And like, so, I mean, some writers like have to plot everything. But in terms of, I want everyone in my plays. Like I don't draw a dividing line. Obviously, the director, I trust any director that I work with, but generally speaking, I don't have like a formulation in my head of specific instances of who a character has to be. So I'm operate on kind of a blank slate. And I don't know if that's because I approach it more as a kind of a poetic kind of experiment rather than like a traditional narrative. I've never been a traditional kind of person in many respects. So, but like, yeah, no, I'm a blank slate with characters. So that does not infect me at all. I don't like when the casting is boring. And again, I'm gonna sound like I'm 16 again, but like, I hate uncreative casting and like, I don't want the person who's been in like 19 shows in one season to be in my plays. I want somebody who's hungry, and I want somebody who like I slammed on the counter because I really meant that. But yeah, I want to work with everyone, and I don't have any specifics when I look at characters, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Inclusive is definitely a good group to work with.
Oh yeah, like I mean, I have huge problems. I mean, I've been like doing like I grew up on the Lower West Side of Buffalo, so like I've had a much different upbringing than a lot of people I interact with in the theater community in general. Like I didn't go to school for theater. I mean, my high school barely had textbooks or like computers or really anything like that. So I really come at it from like a really different angle. And so like, yeah, I don't know where that's going, but I want, bottom line is that the theater community as a whole needs to be more inclusive, and it saddens me that it has not done its due diligence in making that a reality. But,
well, let me ask if I can then one question that I have about all this, and I know you're a proponent of inclusive and all that, and I'm a little bit of an outsider too, and well, I'll talk to you later about starting a punk band because
let's do it.
I'm totally with you.
I have a list of band names that I've been.
There you go. So, but people with disabilities have faced isolation and exclusion for a long time. Like now that we have this pandemic, a lot of people are getting a feeling for what
Mm-hmm.
I dealt with for a long time.
A lot of people go through on the daily. Yep.
Every building that I go to that has stairs and I can't go in, so I sit home and I sit home and I sit home. So having said that, and talking about how we need to break down some of the barriers in the theater community, we know that inclusive is doing some of these things. How do we push for more of that? Like any suggestions on how to break down some of these walls that we kind of face?
Oh man, the 16-year-old in me says be aggressive as possible. The 25-year-old in me says be a charming social butterfly. And now 34-year-old me says be an aggressive social butterfly. But it's tough. We're in a weird situation here too, because I know there's class issues with different theater companies and like stuff like that too. So I don't know like when the dust settles, like if some theater companies will even be around. So it's a very interesting time to reevaluate what we look for in theater and what we
will be.
Yeah. See, there we go. I'll be honest, there was not a doubt in my mind. And I've been trying to like push a conversation with like different theater people on us kind of evaluating like what the audience and what we need as like for theater moving forward. And I think that the conversation needs to start there. Is it simply for financial purposes that a theater runs? Do they have a mission statement? I mean, there are so many theater companies. I mean, I won't, obviously aim any locally, but just generally speaking, like, people don't uphold their mission statement. There's theater companies who may not know why they exist in the first place. And when you forget why you exist in the first place, it's tough to be inclusive. It's tough to like try to, incorporate many different people. So I think in terms of how do we change theaters in town, we have to kind of sit ourselves down with everyone and ask, what are we looking for with theater? What are we hoping to accomplish? And it needs to be kind of a long, dark night of the soul. And I hope that, in this time off with seasons canceled, that many artistic directors have thought about that and have asked themselves, what do we do theater for? It's funny because, not funny, but I guess funny in a way. But like when theaters first started canceling a lot of their season, like suddenly Facebook was like ablaze with, art matters, art is important, and I'm like, I get that, but like if something like this, you should be saying that all the time. Like it's like. I think people are slowly moving to that phase, but we honestly need to reevaluate what we're looking for in our theaters and what we're looking for in the show that we want to experience. And until we can kind of sit down and figure that out, I don't know if anything will happen, monumentally. So I think there's an identity crisis happening, and I hope people are thinking about what we want out of our theater companies.
That's interesting. Thanks, because I didn't really think about that. The whole, organizations kind of, they start and they look outward, but the longer they're around, they start to pull inward and focus on. They kind of develop this insider thinking.
Mm-hmm.
And I never really thought about, and you got to kind of push back against that.
Yeah.
I really thought about that here. So I appreciate your answer. Thanks again.
Yeah, and also I've done my best to like incorporate many different art forms over the years. Like, I don't know, I was going to like basement punk shows when I was like 14. So I just came of age on like Elmwood and Allen. So I had an appreciation for every kind of different art form. Hip hop, dance, somebody hitting a crock pot during a Infringement Festival. Like, it's just, so I have appreciation for that, all of the arts. And I think the biggest problem, not the biggest problem, but one of the problems facing theater in Western New York is that it is very much like the quote unquote cool kids table in a high school cafeteria.
Yeah.
They're generally speaking not very approachable. They generally keep to themselves because like a lot of times people who have started theater companies have almost kind of asked the same question across the board, which is, how do we get involved with the theater community at large? How do we get reviewers to come to the show? How do we get mentioned on radio shows and things like that? And my answer is like, well, you just gotta go to like matinee. But then I'm like, but then even if they go to matinee, it's like a high school prom. I'm like, people aren't as mingling as I would like to. So they keep to themselves is what I'm saying. I feel personally. A lot of times they do keep on an island, and it's not suitable for any kind of growth and for new blood to come into this theater scene, which is sorely needed. So when I like my first play that I had in town, I was like 21, and 2021 around that. And at the time, people were like, "Oh, you're one of like Buffalo's like youngest playwrights," and I'm like, "All right, that's cool." And then like 10 years later, people are like, "You're one of Buffalo's youngest playwrights," and I was like, "No, I should not have that same label 10 years." Like,
yeah, totally get it.
like there has been like, I mean, I want like different voices. I want playwrights from every walk of life to like have an opportunity to showcase their words, and like. So like I've like operated like I've run a lot of like open mics with poetry stuff, and like so I ran one at Cafe Aroma for a number of years, and then eventually I was like, you know what, I'm gonna like pass the torch, and I want a younger poet to like host this who wants to host it. So then like I passed the torch. but then, Cafe Aroma had issues regardless. But like I had this idea of passing the torch and incorporating as many new voices as possible. And like it should be art needs to be this conversation about always inviting different voices in. And like I've done my best to try to do that in the poetry scene, and I'm doing my best in the theater scene, but the theater is a really hard nut to crack with that. And like I know for a fact that like I am not the youngest playwright in town. I have half a Santa Claus in my beard. So like I know for a fact that I am not the youngest playwright in town. And I know there are so many other young playwrights doing such great work. And and we need to do everything we can to get them exposed and like, or encourage them. And I know a lot of people are afraid. I mean, it's not a very welcoming community in the first place. So it's hard to like, it's a very hard experience. It's a very hard thing to let your words out there. And it's even harder to let your words out there in a community that you may not worry gets where you're coming from. And so like, we have to do our best to kind of like change all of that. And you guys are doing a fantastic job at starting that conversation. And I want to like see that carry over to other theater companies. But yeah, needless to say, I am not the youngest playwright in Buffalo, and I want to squash that. I want to squash that myth.
Two things. I know what you mean about having a Santa Claus beard. Yours is much less Santa Claus than mine, and it's weird how that happens. But one thing that the people who have been around in Inclusive, who have known me for a little while, know that, I often talk about our crew. I say we're going to be like the Wu-Tang Clan of theater. If we don't have a space, if other people won't let us in the space, we're going to make our own space. Exactly. That's kind of what I mean by that. Like the easiest way to knock down doors is to create a new door or create your own door.
Absolutely.
And so it's, but there's just, again, I totally appreciate a lot of what you're saying. And, the answer can be just as simple as, keep knocking, keep trying. Some people get it, other people won't. But you keep going anyway, and the people who get it will get it. And wherever you can, just keep pushing, your own thing.
Exactly.
Because it matters. So again, thanks for your answer. I appreciate it.
Oh man, no worries. My pleasure. And like, it's been interesting because like I'm on like the Artie committee now, which is like, a lot of people think it's almost like this weirdly Illuminati like theater organization working in the shadows. But it's kind of I guess, in a weird way. I've been like really pushing. I know that's one of the questions, so I'm just gonna kind of try to do my best to segue into it. So it's been kind of one of these things where it's an organization that's not necessarily as transparent as I would like it to be. And I've been like, there's a lot of rules about like new companies and like how long they need to be around for like them to be considered for like nominations. And it's and I know like on the inside, they recently got younger and more diverse in terms of the actual members of the committee, which is great. So there is like some effort. There is some effort, I will admit, of trying to be more inclusive. I mean, that word was mentioned in a lot of the email chains. So it is acknowledged by certain people that across the board, things need to be more inclusive. And so there is some effort being made. I do want to point that out. I just don't. I didn't want to leave my tangent that everything must be dismantled to be, which is fine. I mean, I've had
caught up in the punk band thing.
Yeah.
So we have about a few minutes left on here, but you are on the artists committee. Can you share some of your experiences of being on that committee?
It is it's fascinating. It's basically like seeing 6 to 8 shows every like 3 or 4 days. Like a weekend, it's basically theater nonstop. And it's almost kind of like, I don't want to compare it to kind of like what's happening now, but how the days are blurring together. It's very, when you see like 5 to 6 shows, things start blurring together. So like that's just poetically speaking, I find it interesting. But it's like I've made it my mission to do my best to kind of showcase and to uplift newer voices in my role. So I've been plugging shows that people may not had initially wanted to see, or plugging like new actors and doing my best to like support new writers. And that's kind of been my mission. I'm almost kind of like this kind of punky upstart on the board, but I've been doing what I can to kind of get the word out there on everything. But yeah, it's fun. It's been an enlightening experience, like what you end up critiquing or what you end up looking for in productions when you see so much in a given weekend. Like like it always feels weird when like after I see like a show, I'm like, I feel like I'm like a freshman English teacher, because I'm like, the thing I'm looking for, I'm like, what stirs my soul? And like, it feels like a weird thing, like after years of seeing shows, that's my first instinct, but it truly is. I'm like, what made me think? And like sure, like there can be, I also come from the idea that like, I'm like, if it's a spectacle and there are cool lights, that's nice. But like, if like the words that the actor says on stage, if I wasn't moved by them or didn't believe in them, like the play will automatically lose me. I look for genuineness a lot of the times, which is something I just kind of look for on the daily. More genuine, more organic, soul-stirring dialogue. Just I can go, but like I want it to be as real as possible. And we live in very unreal times, so it's very weird for me to say I'm looking for what's real, but everything is unreal. So what am I really looking for? And I guess that's the blank that I'm talking about earlier. But nevertheless, it's a good group of people on there, and we're doing everything we can to incorporate as much as we can from everyone. I feel like that was a very politician response, I think, guys. But hopefully that answered kind of a question.
Do you ever find it challenging to get other people to buy into a show that maybe didn't get as much praise?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's, I mean, I as much as I pride myself on that. If I believe in something, I can be very charming about it, but in trying to get people to see it. But it can be very difficult. I mean, again, it's this idea of that, like theater and the creative arts, especially in this community, is like you're working multiple jobs. So when somebody is working 2 jobs and then they're on the committee, and then they have to see multiple shows, and then so they do almost have to pick and choose. But that's almost, I think, the issue with kind of understanding theater in general in town, is that like all of us are working multiple gigs trying to get by. And I feel like a lot of companies don't think that's a reality. So I think I'm almost kind of trying to turn this into a working class kind of thing. But yeah, so it's difficult trying to convince somebody to see a show they weren't planning on seeing when they have like a family or multiple jobs. But you know what? I have convinced them, and I will continue to do so.
So we have about 1 minute left, and I think we've asked you the easy questions. Now it's time for the hard questions.
Yeah, give me a hard question.
Are you ready?
Yeah, I will babble my way through it, hopefully. But
when do you think we'll be able to see theater again?
Oh,
on
man.
a stage?
That is so. I know they just canceled like Pride as of a couple days ago, I think. Mm-hmm. So ideally, I don't think like Shakespeare is going to happen. I don't think like summer shows are going to happen. Obviously, I'm coming from this not with much insider info, but I would like to think like mid-fall, but I don't think we're going to see anything in the summer for sure. So we need to be creative with the way we produce content. So everyone get to work. But I definitely imagine it lasting until the fall. And that's to say, I know some theaters already had some financial hardships prior to this. So I don't know if some of them will be around. No one really wants to talk about a lot. No one wants to have that hard conversation, which I've been wanting to, because I think people need to be transparent about a lot of the thing with a lot of theater companies is that everything is very secret. And like, if somebody is struggling, if a friend is I'll put it this way: if a friend is struggling, I want them to ideally, talk about it, talk to me about it, and we'll see what we can do. I also expect the same thing out of arts organizations. So if there is any sort of struggling, I want it out in the open so we can kind of see if we can find a solution. So that being said, I'm not seeing theater happening until, October, November at the very earliest, in my opinion.
And finally, so what should we do in between?
Oof.
How do
we should continue making Zoom a lot of money. And I mean, so like I've been doing like along with my fiance, like dress up contests. I've been having actors read like poems that I've written inspired by shows about them that they record, and then I share the videos. I think now is the time to see how far we can push what art and creativity is. And, I think for none of us here right now, but, generally speaking, a lot of people have gotten lazy with how art is consumed and how art is digested. And like, you get in your car or you walk to the theater, you get a ticket, you sit down, and then you leave. And like, that's the extent of the experience. And I think that now is the perfect time for us to have these beautiful conversations about how can we get art out there, and how can we share voices from people whose voices need to be shared, and how we can get that to the most audience we can. And now that the traditional way of doing that is down, I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to share monologues that we record, see if we can do a play with the Hollywood Square style Zoom we have going on. Like, we can totally like do stage readings this way. We can totally do productions this way. And we absolutely need to break down any walls that may have separated us. So a lot of times people don't think about those walls when the system's in place. People just get kind of lazy, which is fine, that's human nature. So we don't really think about ways we can subvert that. And now we have an empty palette that we can figure out how we can get our mission statements and voices out there. And anything should be on the table, is what I'm getting at.
Well, that is all the time that we have. Thank you so much, Justin, for joining us on this Saturday evening.
Hey, my pleasure. Apologies if I rambled. I did basically just emerge from like a nap, but not that I've been like a post ranty nap vibe. But yeah, hopefully, this is lovely. It's great seeing all your faces, and it's nice to see life, and especially life talking about things that are important. And I appreciate it.
Thanks again for being on. And we definitely appreciate it. And we are going to be moving forward through this creative situation.
Absolutely. So next week, we will have Brian Donovan from Kelly's Hollywood join us.
Good luck, Carly, my fiance.
Hi.
She's playing with, they're doing a Stranger Things Lego board, her and Melissa Leventhal, who lives upstairs from us. But
both on our show.
Yeah.
We need girls. We need girls.
Sorry, I got myself invested in this like 2,000 piece Lego Stranger Things set that I can't pull myself away from.
Finish it.
There's gonna be a lot of nights of doing that Lego piece, by the way. But
all right. Well, thank you so much for being here with us, and thank you for letting us put on the Opioid Zodiac again. That was
man, my pleasure. It was by far one of the most thrilling experiences I've got to see of my work on stage, and I hope I'm able to do that again with you guys.
We look forward to it.
Yeah, thank you. Do you guys have like a sign off? Because I know you did one of these last week. I don't know if you have like a sign off at this point in which it's like a thing you say at the end.
That we do.
Yeah. You know, they do like talk shows. They always have something they end with, like, good night and good luck or whatever.
Usually,
I mean, no pressure, no pressure.
usually it's Amy that says something.
Yeah.
And her mic is muted, so it's up to
On
you.
purpose. Karcher, make one for us. Let's think of one.
I thought you had it.
I don't have what? No, it was Wu-Tang last week.
That's true. Yes.
It's always
I
Wu-Tang.
can cross my fingers to do it, but Dallas can do it. There you go.
Justin, thank you so much. You are super inspiring. I sat here and I am like completely jazzed.
Oh, well, that's great. Like, I just feel a lot of times I ramble, but like, okay, good. It's almost kind
nice
of
to hear that you're on the same page as we are. I mean, we talk about inclusion till people get tired of hearing it, and it's nice to hear it coming from other people. Also, that you share some of the experience that I have also experienced in the theater community. I've been around for a little while too, and it's not always as it should be. But we're gonna we make doors. I don't give a fuck. Like whatever.
Oh, exactly.
No.
You can no censoring on Zoom as far as I know.
No. I mean, we just keep building doors, and hopefully, at some
There's
point.
the Lego of
Hopper.
Hopper.
It's Hopper.
Well,
That's fantastic. Sideways.
You can't. Yeah.
Oh my! It's beautiful.
And you can't put him. He doesn't fit in the car, but he's got a coffee mug.
That's a bigger than his head.
That's great.
Just took us an hour.
You're like the Vanna White of Lego pieces.
It's pretty awesome. Well, and we'd love to have you guys back to talk about all things Disney at some point too, because respect.
Oh man, she could. She can. I'm sure.
The clothing
I'm sure she's
challenge
down
is
for that.
pretty savage too, right? Like I've seen some really good stuff coming from James and Emily. That would be awesome to showcase one week as well, especially if we're stuck doing this till fall.
Which I think we will be, but my fingers are crossed. But we need to stay safe first. So
yeah. Well, I can't think of a better segue than that. Just be safe and well, and thank you again for being on. And we look forward to having you a part of Inclusive forever. We love you. You're stuck with us, and I don't say that lightly. Chris will tell you that.
Once you're in forever.
You're in.
There's only one way out.
All right. Well, I'm down. I'm down for wherever this journey takes us. So.
Well, and I will let you know we were gonna have a poetry night where we just do all the things. We're gonna have a writing group night, and we have some stage readings coming up. So we would love to have you involved, and hopefully your work. That would be great. So yeah, a lot of things going on.
Well, thank you very much. Love you all. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon.
You got it. We love you. Be safe and well. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.